How many of you were here yesterday? How many of you were not here yesterday? Okay, people who were here yesterday, do you see the people who were not here yesterday? Keep your hands up. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to have you talk at your tables about the best thing about yesterday. What was the best thing about yesterday? People who were not here, please let the people who were here, please let the people who were not here know what was best about yesterday. So when you see the hands go up, you put your hands up and you stop talking, please. That's the key. All right? So what was the best thing about yesterday? Let's get the conversation started. Go. All right, so what were the best things about yesterday? Shout them out. Say that louder, please. Consent agenda. What else? Hearing other voices. What else? Something in cultivate foundations is what I heard. Ways to cultivate foundations. Great. Okay. Yes? Connections with partners. Thinking differently about the resources around us. It's excellent. Okay, so there are people that are way over there on that side of the room. I can almost see them way over there. Really encourage you to come closer to join the conversation closer. Just so you know, not going to force you to do anything. You don't have to, but we would welcome you to come closer. All right, so this morning my job is to talk a little bit about PANO's listening tour, and I've titled the presentation, PANO's listening tour, Why It Matters to You, because I can sit up here and talk about PANO's listening tour, and who cares, because that's about PANO. But we want to talk about why PANO's listening tour is important to you, and I want to start with the story of the little red hen. The little red hen went out and she decided that she wanted to plant some grain, she wanted to mill some flour, she wanted to bake some bread. And she asked the question, who will help me? Not I, said the dog. Not I, said the pig. Not I, said the cat. And she said, so I'll do it myself, said the little red hen, and she did. So the lesson from that is I think so often when we do our work, we talk about how to do it ourselves. We talk about going it on our own. We stress out because we're trying to do conferences together. We're trying to do programming, by ourselves. We're trying to do programming by ourselves. We're trying to do all these things by ourselves, and there just isn't enough resources because we're trying to do it by ourselves. So my message to you this morning is it's not about ourselves. It's about doing it together. So when someone says to you, will you help me? The answer is what? Yay! The answer is yes, I'll be willing to help, and this is what I can contribute so that together we can create thriving communities. So one of the techniques that PANO has chosen to use to find out how to engage others is we've chosen to go out on a listening tour, and I've now lost my clicker. Here we go. We've chosen to go out on a listening tour because we believe that instead of asking the question, or instead of saying 5 plus 5 equals 10, which is a very linear process, we've said maybe we don't know what goes into the equation of who PANO should be. So why don't we say question mark plus question mark equals 10? Think about that. If you start with 5 plus 5, you're going to end up with a very specific end goal. But if you start out with question mark plus question mark equals 10, you have 1,000 different ways of getting to the end goal. So one of the things that we really want here at PANO is to know if we're walking alongside of you in ways that are really critical and really important. And we want to engage with you as we move forward together. The reason why I'm talking about this today is because a listening tour is one way to engage others in your community. So we want to talk with you about how we're doing it so that you can learn with us and from us what we're doing so that you can perhaps go home and use some of these tools and tricks when you're talking to your folks at home. One of the things I want to start out by talking about the listening tour is I want to talk about how organic the process has been. I want to start by talking about the board. The board has been incredibly, the PANO board specifically, the PANO board has been extremely critical to this process. I came on board, by the way, this is the end of my 5th month at PANO, so I've ended my 5th month. Woo! I have survived, which is great. So, but when I came on board at PANO, one of the things we talked about together with the board was we need to figure out how can we best serve the people that we're here to serve. And I asked the board to go out with me because we thought that the listening tour would be a great idea. And I said, so here's what I think we should do. We should go out and have focus groups everywhere. You guys should facilitate the focus groups and send us the results, and we'll compile them and send them out to the state. And they said, nuh-uh, we're not going to do that. But we will help you in different ways. We will help you setting up conversations for you around the state. We want you to go out and meet people in the state because we think that's really critical during this time when we are changing directions. Every single board member has done something to contribute to the tour. Some board members have helped us set up focus groups. Some board members have sponsored the listening tour. Some board members have set up meeting places for us to have focus groups. Other board members have set up individual meetings for us to have the listening tour. Some board members have come up to be a part of the conversations. Every board member has contributed what they can in the way that they could do it, which is modeling Stone Soup. It's been absolutely thrilling. Everyone's been engaged, and we're very excited about that. So I wanted to talk about how organic the process has been. In addition to that, we have a series of questions, which I'm going to get into in just a little bit. Those questions have been developed over time, and we change them as we practice our language, because language matters. So we started out by asking questions that we ultimately changed because we realized that people don't always get, we don't always get each other's language. An example of that is we talk about sponsors and how maybe you could be a sponsor for some event. Well, that immediately talks about a transactional relationship rather than a relationship. So we're starting to talk about how can we partner with you moving forward in this thing called thriving communities. So when we get into the questions, I want you to pay attention to the language because language really matters. So our 3 main questions are, and I want you to really pay attention to this. What do you love about your community? What would 100% success look like in your community, and what would it take to get there? Here's what those questions do not cover. What do you need, and how can PANO help you? We never asked it. Now sometimes, I shouldn't say we never asked it, sometimes we tested ideas as we went along, but we didn't say what do you need and how can we help. We said, what do you see as being 100% successful in your communities? And what would it take to get there? And out of that, we've gotten a ton of really great information. So I wanted to point that out because you can do this when you go out and talk to your constituents. Some of the results of the listening tour. What do you love about your community? The first primary thing that we've heard so far in the 5 different areas that we've been, you ready for this? The natural beauty. I heard that everywhere. It doesn't matter if it was urban environment, rural environment, whatever, the natural beauty of the countryside. The second thing that people liked or talked about in terms of what they loved about their community was the talented, generous people who care deeply. There are really good people everywhere in the state. We should be proud of that. The third thing that people loved about their communities is our rich history. We share a love of rich history around the state. I've heard that everywhere, in every single community that I've been in. People talk about Pennsylvania being a great place to live and raise a family, walkability, and a place where relationships matter. Those are all things that are really critical to creating community and building relationships and engaging people. Then when we talked about what would 100% success look like, these are the themes that came out, and I also want to point out that on your tables there is an executive summary of the listening tour report. If you want a full copy of the report, we have copies back on the table as well. So the first thing that people said that they needed to see 100% success is that everyone would have enough transportation, enough mental health services, enough stigma-free environment, so enough places with accessibility, The second theme that came out is that people and businesses would think positively about the communities that they live in, and that people would want to move into their communities. So different places throughout the state, we've seen people moving out of the community because there isn't enough economic development, there aren't enough jobs. A couple communities talked about having a low self-esteem as a community, so they really want to develop the sense of community so that people will want to move in and grow businesses there. The third thing they talked about is that, and I love this, are you ready for this? That systems and people can easily connect. Systems and people could easily connect, which is really, really critical to us moving forward here. And finally, that people and businesses would be fully engaged. So the next slide should not be surprising. And the answers were to the question, what would it take? Facilitation of collaborative efforts. So one of the strongest themes we heard throughout the listening tour is that we like to communicate. One of the things that people really want is help with collaboration. So when I said, what do you love about your community? Are generous people who work so well together. And when I said, what is it that it would take to reach 100% success? We need more help in engaging with each other. We need help in knowing how to and who to collaborate with. Another theme that came out really strongly is we need more people. We are stretched to the bone. We need more people. We need our people to be adequately trained. And the third thing that it would take is that we really need to change our image from being this, I don't know what the word is, this low self-esteem. We're not as good as a business community. We're not as good as a government community. We need a better image, and we could use some help with that. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about some things that we heard in terms of how PANO could help. What I would like you to do for just a few minutes is take the index cards at your tables and jot down your responses to these two questions. What would 100% success look like in your community? And what will it take you to get there? What will 100% success look like in your community? And what will it take to get there? We are considering the conference a stop on our listening tour. We really value your input. So we want to know, what would 100% success look like in your community, and what would it take for you to get there? So today I'm asking you to grow grain, to mill flour, to bake bread, to join the we. Because we together, only we together, can create thriving communities throughout Pennsylvania. I can tell you that PANO cannot do that on its own. There's only 5 of us, and there's 67 counties. But with you, we can do anything. With you, we can do anything. So please join the we, which does mean dancing chickens, or maybe the chicken dance, I'm not sure. But we really would like you to join the we and to let us know how we can walk alongside you as well. Thank you. So joining me on stage next is Hildy Gottlieb, and she's going to talk a little bit about the questions and how they were designed for this conference. This whole conference has been about drafting the right kinds of questions. So hopefully we can give you some tools as you move forward.
What I thought I would do is start a little bit by telling you guys where this whole thought came from to blow the conference up and start over again. Is Jim Bendel here? I saw him running around in shorts earlier. Where's Bendel? He ducked out to play tennis. Damn. This whole thing started, I mean, if we really go back to where this started many, many years ago with Michael Coomer, who is on the PANO board and is a phenomenal community rabble-rouser. But fast forwarding to last August, Jim Bendel, who you saw on the stage here with us yesterday, is the CEO of the Westmoreland County Community Foundation. And he and Susan Aceto, his right hand, invited Dimitri and me to come to Westmoreland County and to start a conversation about capacity building. And the question that Jim and Susan were asking was, what if capacity building was not just about building the capacity of organizations? What if it was about building the capacity of communities and the capacity of organizations to affect change in their communities? And so we sat for about 2 days. It was Jim and his staff in Westmoreland County. Jordan was there. It was some of the PANO staff, because we said, you know, if you're going to talk about capacity building, we better bring PANO in, because they are the state's meta capacity builders. There were several foundation leaders there, folks who are interested in capacity building, and just really looked at the question of, if capacity building were 100% successful, what would our communities look like? And the answer was that communities would have the tools and the know-how, not organizations necessarily, but communities would know how to respond to needs and would know how to accomplish great things if opportunities arose, and that organizations would have the know-how to facilitate making that happen. And so that was last August, and we started to rumble a little bit about, okay, we've got all of these pieces in place. We've been talking about all of this really cool stuff. Hey, look, the PANO conference is coming up. We could play an experiment with the conference and see if this can be a real good, solid starting point for this conversation. Now, that's last August. We talked, we sort of ruminated a little bit and brainstormed a little bit. It was after Thanksgiving that we sat down, and you know, Anne said that I'm smiling that Anne said that she's been here 5 months. Any of you guys have kids? Okay, you know that you go when they're a newborn from describing their age in weeks, and then you go when they're a toddler, you're describing their age in months. It is only several weeks that Anne hasn't been saying how many weeks she's been here. She's now up to, I was smiling saying, ooh, we're now talking about. But in this very, very short time since Thanksgiving is when we started to say, you know what, we've got a conference coming up. Let's plan this. Let's put what we can into this. And so that's the evolution of this. It's why we have said very, very many times, this is a learning experience for us, and we've put it together in relatively short time. But one of the things that we've learned in the work that Dimitri and I have been doing and building Creating the Future, and that our fellows have learned, when you put in place favorable conditions for good things to happen, good things happen, and they happen fast. And so the fact that we had 5 months to put this conference together in the way that we did, and I'm going to share with you what that way is and all of the thinking that went into what you're experiencing here. Because one of the things that we learned is there's a lot of black box out in the world of, well, just trust that things will happen. And if we do this, it will have, yeah, we don't believe in the black box. Very, very explicit about what you're experiencing, why it feels like it does, and what we have actually done to put those favorable conditions in place for you guys. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today, is really the theory and the research and the experimentation that we've been doing for 15, 16 years with Dimitri and me, starting way, way back as a consulting firm, and for the past 4 or 5 years as Creating the Future. If we change the questions, we can change the world. And that is what we've learned after 15 years of our research, our experimentation, and especially in the past 5 years, there's about 100 Creating the Future fellows all around the world, and it has sort of made me weak at the knees to know that we have in this conference the largest conflagration of our fellows. We have, I see Esther sitting there with a big smile, we have, I think, 15 or 17 of our fellows in the conference and in the room. Do you guys want to hold your hands up if you're actually in the room? I see Esther there, James is in the back. We've got. So these are folks that you can ask about Creating the Future, and I'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a fellow. But what we have found over and over again is, as Anne said, it's the language and it's the questions that we ask. It's the questions that we ask. So what I'm going to share with you guys is a little bit of the why. Why do we talk about this? Why did we build the conference the way we did? How did we turn that theory into practice, and what does it look like, and what have you guys been experiencing, and what the results are? I'm going to start with the research and the thinking behind the doing. People tend to look at this slide and they sort of say, you know, duh. Our assumptions create our actions. Our actions create our results, and our assumptions come from a whole lot of stuff we carry with us, both genetically, historically, our own life experience. The start of all of this, and some of you I know have seen my TED Talk, the start of all of this was a a frustration as Dimitri and I were consulting to community organizations. What we sensed over and over again was the frustration that, is there anybody in this room that's not working hard enough? You know, I mean, we're all like working so hard, and it's not just folks who are in the traditional nonprofit sector that are working this hard. It is our board members who are working this hard in their day jobs and then working this hard when they come onto the board, and they're spending how many hours. It is how many meetings are we attending as community members, as government officials, and what we sensed was this overwhelming frustration that we're working so hard, and we should be seeing more change in our communities for the work that we're doing. And it's just this overwhelming, a lot of reactive movements have come out of that. We have seen the measurement movement that popped up about 15 years ago in the foundation world, where all of a sudden we wanted logic models, we wanted to see how you were going to measure your results, because we were frustrated that we weren't seeing the results. And so we're constantly seeing this drumbeat of why are we not seeing the results, why are we not? We are also seeing that frustration internally. We're seeing that frustration in things like, how many of you guys have been, are attending, wanting to learn a little bit more about fundraising and resourcing? Okay, and how many of you that want to know about fundraising and resourcing have already been to other fundraising workshops, have read other fundraising books, have gone online looking for stuff? Most of you, I see heads nodding, right. Okay, if everything we were doing were working, why are you looking for more information on that? You know, we have actually been so frustrated with all of the things that don't work, and we sense frequently that nothing's ever going to change. We hear this a lot, that we can't fight the system, that the systems are stacked against us, that no matter what we try, nothing ever changes. And what we realized is exactly that, that it is the systems that we use, but it's not what the systems do, it's the assumptions rooted in our systems. It's the assumptions embedded. It's the systems that we use for resourcing. It's the systems that we use for planning and decision making, how we engage with each other. One of the things that we found about the systems is that we don't have control over what goes on at that very, very left edge of the screen. We don't have control over our genetics, our life experience, our cultural history, but we do have control over the rest of it. And I've so often had people say to me, well, how do I change my assumptions? That's just a ridiculous thing. You're telling me to... If we change the questions we ask, we change the assumptions. Our assumptions are the questions that we are answering that we don't even know are being asked. Our assumptions are the stories we tell ourselves that we don't even realize we're telling ourselves. We just believe as truth. This is reality. This is how it is. And that is what we hand down because we humans are storytelling animals. This is one of our methods of survival. We all hear this as we're growing up, that one of the tools that humans have is we hand down stories. We are not as strong, as fast, as deeply clawed and toothed as a tiger, but we can tell our next of kin how to avoid the tiger. And so that is how we survive. So let's talk a little bit about the story that we have been handing down generation after generation. As we started to think about this stuff, we started to say, okay, where do our stories come from? Where do our assumptions come from? The assumption of scarcity, the assumptions of suspecting the worst in each other. Where do, whatever we're assuming, whether we assume the best in each other or the worst, where do they come from? Well, you know, I started to think, okay, mine probably came from my parents, and came from my schooling, and came from, okay, well, where'd my parents come from? Well, came from their parents. And suddenly, you start going back in time, and we realize that we've been telling ourselves the same story for 50,000 years, or however long humanity's been around. We've been telling ourselves this story since this guy was around, and he was our grandparents. Chances are he had a little bit darker skin, because we all come from the same mother, and we tend to forget that too. The story that we have been handing down makes absolute sense in the days where we were hunter-gatherers, where life was hard, where things were scarce, where you had to respect the guy next door because if you left your stuff out, he was going to take it. Otherwise, he was going to have to go hunt for it. The best we could do was react to the circumstances around us and hope to God that we survived. And if we survived, we were what, 35 was life expectancy? 30? If you were 25, you were doing good? And that was what life was like. And it made perfect sense for these to be the assumptions that we had at that time in our human history. And if we're frustrated, I have to share with you these assumptions, why we're frustrated. But we have evidence over and over and over again that this is not the only story that we need to tell ourselves. When we see huge leaps forward in history, the assumptions are completely different, We're not reacting to what's coming at us. We are creating a new reality. And if anything was proven in the Indian independence movement, in the U.S. civil rights movement, in the freedom movement in South Africa, if anything was proven, is that they could create a new reality. Martin Luther King didn't say we have a problem. He said, I have a dream. And we were moving towards something. We weren't looking at scarcity. We were looking at, we've got enough and we can build on what we have. Think about the civil rights movement. Think about the strengths-building efforts of the civil rights movement. This was a movement, as all three of these movements were, that built on the strengths of people who had systematically had their strength taken away from them. And yet it built on their strengths. It didn't assume we don't have enough and we have to suspect each other. If the nonviolent movement was about anything, it was about bringing out the best in each other rather than looking at the worst in each other. That's what these movements have shown us we also have inside us. And what we can do is we can replace that old story with a new story. And the new story is actually what the story is of life in the 21st century. It's so interesting how these assumptions are so deeply embedded in us. And again, I said, these are the questions we don't even realize we're asking, and we're answering them all the time. We know over and over, psychological studies have shown that if somebody leaves a wallet out filled with cash, that the vast majority of times, people who find that wallet will do whatever it takes to find who owns that wallet and return it. And they won't take anything out of it. We've all seen those studies. And yet we all sense that if you left a wallet out, the first thing somebody would say is, oh yeah, it's going to be gone. Or I may get the wallet back, but there's not going to be any cash left. It's not reality. And yet that's the story we're telling ourselves. We all hear ourselves saying it. We have enough resource in the world to feed the world 1,000,000 times. And yet we still hear the drumbeat, yeah, but there'll always be poverty. Yeah, but there'll always be poor people. No, there don't have to be. And as far as what we can accomplish, we don't have to think the best we can do is to react to or prevent the things we don't want. Because we see evidence of that all the time. I mean, how many of you have been on Skype in the past week? Right, okay. We can talk to each other. There's so many people in this room that I forgot I've never met face to face because I've seen them on Skype so much. I mean, I walked up to Joe earlier in the conference and I looked at him, honest to Pete. We have been talking on Skype for the past couple of months, but I didn't really realize, you sort of, he's in a group when we're Skyping, and I looked up at him and I went, you look really familiar. Why do I know you? I assumed I knew him from real life. Okay, we don't have to react to what's wrong. We've got these fabulous evidences of what we can accomplish. How many of you right now know if there are people orbiting this planet up in space? How many of you know for a fact if there are or there aren't? I mean, the fact that we just sort of assume, okay, it's going on up there. I was born at a time where in 1969 we all sat watching our black and white TVs going, holy mother, look at that. And now it's so day to day we don't even, I guess there's somebody up there. We just don't even realize it. So what we can accomplish as a species that unless something is physically impossible, it's possible. And we know that. And yet we keep aiming our best social innovations at ending what's wrong rather than reaching for what's possible. We keep asking, what do we want for our world? And we keep talking about what we want to end instead of what we want to create. And again, that comes down to the questions that we ask. If assumptions are the questions that we're answering that we don't even know we're asking, then what happens if we change the questions? We can change the questions we all ask every single day, and we can change the world just by how we live in it and how we interact in our organizations and how our organizations community and how we run our businesses just by the questions we ask. That's why our entire booth is just a fishbowl full of questions. And we hope you'll take one of those questions and ask somebody that question, because questions. One of the other things you'll see in your green bags, thanks to Giant, your green bags, is the list of questions that Dimitri and I posed that Creating the Future has created, is a list of questions on one side that come from reactivity and scarcity, and on the other side saying, how can we reframe that? You saw yesterday when Jim tried to goad me and tried to say, okay, what are the things I want to hear? What you'll see on the other side of that page is questions that bring out the best in each other, because that's really what this is all about. We can bring out the best just by the questions we ask in our decision making, just in the questions we ask in our day-to-day. Instead of starting with, what do we have to do today? Or if something goes wrong, what are we going to do? We can ask, what would success look like? I loved, Anne, when you said that on the listening tour, you specifically didn't say, what do you need? You said, what'll it take? It's a subtle difference in language, but what do you need makes us go, oh God, what do we not have? But what'll it take to get there is a really affirming question. What do you want to accomplish, and what will it take to get there? If we change the questions that are embedded in the systems we use every single day, we can root our decisions in collective enoughness. And I'm going to talk about that in my breakout. But collective enoughness is the reality that together we have everything we need. We only realize scarcity when we're on our own. Together we have everything we need. We only realize scarcity when we're on our own. And we can root our decisions in that. We can root our realities in that and our plans in the assumption, oh, together we have everything we need. But what's the first place we go to? Oh, God, how are we going to do this? Just as Anne said, on our own, how are we going to do this? If we change the questions that are embedded in the plans we create, we don't have to react to what's wrong in our communities and ask, how do we deal with the present we don't like? Instead, we can ask, how do we create the future we do want? If we change the questions and the systems that we use in our day-to-day work, we can bring out the best in each other as just our natural way of being. We don't have to work so hard at it. We don't have to stop and think about it, because our reflexive questions will be asking that. Here's the bottom line of what we found. And it's always interesting for me. I do way better without a handheld because I tend to talk with my hands. But one of the things that we have found is that life is cause and effect. We all sort of know that. What we are doing with the assumptions that live in that scarcity world is, if we are assuming scarcity as reality, that we have to suspect that others will take our stuff, right? We've got a good idea. How do we make sure somebody else doesn't steal it? That's coming from that place of scarcity. And that continues to create a spirit of reactivity. Because if I got to protect it, I got to protect it from you. Oh my gosh, you may have heard it already. Now I got to react. And what we're doing is actually perpetuating. If you guys are wondering why we're frustrated in the work we're doing, it's because we are on a vicious cycle of scarcity and reactivity and suspecting the worst of each other. And suspecting that we have got to The same thing happens, though, when we change the questions. When our questions bring out the best in each other, cause and effect kicks in. Anybody want Courtney? She's back there. When we change the questions and we bring out the best in each other, when we assume immediately, change the questions, that there is enough, and we're bringing out the best in each other, and we can create whatever we want, we reinforce that for each other as well. That's what led to this conference. That's why it was easy. And here's the other thing, and some of you who saw my TED Talk have seen this. When we are working out of scarcity and suspicion and reactivity, how good do you feel? I mean, just those 3 words. When I say those 3 words, anybody feel great when I say scarcity and reactivity? It triggers all of those brain chemicals that we have no control over. We talked before about what do we have control over. We have no control over triggering all of those chemicals that go off when we're in fear. But when we are bringing out the best in each other, when we're assuming that I can bring out the best in you, I'm not necessarily even assuming that you're at your best. I'm assuming I have the power by the questions I ask to say, hey, what's exciting to you about this conference so far? Not what did you hate or what could we do better? But by the questions we ask, we can actually stop ourselves from going into fear mode. And that is what happened with this conference. We asked questions that would create favorable conditions for good things to happen. And we laid down the groundwork for good things to happen. And we said, we want people to connect. And not just on the way to the bathroom. We want people to connect in every single session, 2, 3, 4 times in a session. We want to make that so integral that people get to know each other. Well, what conditions can we create? Anne's question, what could it take? Well, we could actually put it in there. That would be cool. One of the things that you probably have sensed already, and you will sense later on as those of you who were here yesterday go to more sessions, is that the speakers all had a similar mandate to create outcomes. So this is not by magic. Again, no black box here. The speakers were all asked, we really want the outcome to be building relationships. We really want the outcomes to be building on strengths. We really want the outcomes to be talking about shared vision, and we want to change the questions that we ask. So now let me talk just briefly about how we put this into practice, because you're already starting to see how we put it into practice. We've mentioned a couple of times throughout, but I'm going to tell you very, very briefly about what Creating the Future is. Creating the Future is a living laboratory, and we have a 10-year mission. That 10-year mission is to see a shift globally in the way questions are asked in the day-to-day. In our day-to-day workplaces, in our organizations, in our communities, is to change the questions that we naturally ask. And it really is a living laboratory. We don't claim to have all the answers. We like questions better than having the answers. We do a lot of education programs. When I talked about our fellows, we have week-long immersion courses that our fellows have been through, some of them once, some of them twice. Gail Valeriot, sitting here, is one of 2 individuals who are on our faculty track to start teaching on behalf of Creating the Future, which is a real blessing. But we really are focusing on the questions that we ask in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day practices, and how do we embed those into the work that everybody does. We know from our fellows that things work in individual organizations. They have been out doing this work around the world. They're seeing phenomenal results in how organizations interact with their communities and completely shift their thinking just by the questions they ask. So for us, and Anne mentioned that this is a demonstration project, for us, working with PANO, working with Jim at the Community Foundation in Westmoreland County, is this amazing opportunity to say, okay, instead of one organization at a time, what would happen if you had a room full of people who then went back out into their communities and changed the questions they were asking throughout the entire state of Pennsylvania? And as we come back together here at, I think it's 3:30 or 3:40, the final session, frequently we leave a conference. I mentioned this yesterday. We leave a conference and we go back to the pile on our desk and we forget everything. Our goal is that our communities are really amazing, and that this, along with the listening tour, as part of the listening tour, kicks that off. And so that's what our final session is going to be, is really how do we embed new questions into the work that we're all doing. We're doing a lot of weird and different things at Creating the Future. We really are a laboratory. We invite each and every one of you to be lab partners with us. There's a million ways that you can participate. And one of the interesting things that we've done, we've mentioned that we are live streaming, so hello to you guys out there. We're live streaming the plenaries here. We're very comfortable with that technology because you can watch and participate in any of our meetings. Our board meetings, our branding meetings, our fundraising meetings, any meetings that you guys would normally have, we do live online with Twitter participation. So when we say we want to know the wisdom in the room, we're walking that talk. We're opening up our doors and saying we're going to have conversations about the stuff that everybody usually hunkers down and keeps behind closed doors, that are we going to suspect the worst in each other or embrace the best in each other? Well, if we're not going to suspect the worst, then why do we have to close our doors? So we opened up our doors and we asked for people's participation. And we have a Twitter hashtag, which is CTFuture, and people watch our meetings and tweet in. People we don't know are tweeting into our board meetings. Why? Because they're interested. And if they're interested, then they are our community. So when we talk about we have to go out to the community, we're making the assumption that we're in here and they're out there. If we open the doors, we're all community. We're all community. And so it's one of the many, many ways. If you go to our homepage at creatingthefuture.org, you will see that we don't have a donate button and we don't have a volunteer button. We have a participate button. Again, it's all in the questions that we ask. So what you're seeing in the conference is that every single session is modeling this. Every single session is asking you to get to know each other, is asking you to not only create a vision, but to see that vision is the context for everything. So no matter what the topic has been, it fits into that vision for the community because that's the thing we all share. And again, I'm going to talk about that in my session a little bit more. We've asked in every single session that you share your wisdom. This ridiculous notion that it's only the person at the front of the room that knows stuff. We all know stuff. We all know lots of stuff. If we can build on the wisdom of each other, then we can completely change the systems that we use because we all have it already together. We have everything we need. We're also looking at time to reflect, and you have been asked many times during the conference and will be asked more for time to reflect. And the reason for that is really simple. How many of you have said in the last week, I don't have time to think? Usually what it comes out as is, I don't have time to pee. I know that. You know, I mean, we're all going at such a pace. We never take time to think on our own, and goodness knows, we do not take time to think together. We may take time to brainstorm about a topic, but we don't take time to stop and say, what do you think about that? Just in an open, we just had a really intense discussion. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Just as an aside, we have found we do that at our board meetings, and you'll see it if you watch our board meetings. The end of every board meeting and the end of every major discussion, we take time to say, what stood out for you in that discussion? And what we find is it stops parking lot conversations. All the stuff that people would go outside and talk about is because they didn't have a chance to talk about it in the board meeting. So again, what we're trying to do is model not just the content, and that's one of the big things we've learned. It's not just about the content. Remember when you were a kid, your mom used to say, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it? It's not just the what you learn, it's the format and the process by it. If the only way we learn and the only way we interact with our communities is I'm the organization, I'm standing at the front of the room and I'm telling you, community, what to do, that's going to be a very, very different interaction than I'm opening my doors and we're all in this together. And so that's a lot of what we've tried to model in the sessions here is ways that you can be in your organizations. You can start every staff meeting with, hey, what happened in the past week that you're really excited about? We knew a hospital CEO who started every staff meeting by asking, what evidence have you guys seen of our values in action? Pretty cool, huh? An interactive conversation that's not just getting down to business. Because that's what matters, is people matter. And again, it's all in the questions that we ask, because when we start a staff meeting, we're asking a question. Okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? Instead of, let's bring our whole selves into the room just for a minute. You know, I mentioned yesterday that there's people seeing through different lenses as they come in. Some of what we're trying to do here is just give you, if you're the type that's just looking for something new to try, giving you something new to try. And it's not just, again, in the content, it's in the format as well. So let's talk a little bit about the results. Have you guys noticed, I'm guessing, because I stopped in just about every session, I saw energy in just about every session. Have you guys felt the energy in the room? Has it been noticeable to you? There's a little bit of a different energy in the room. And the thing that I specifically love, I know you've all noticed it because everybody's laughing about it. When you're asked at the beginning of the session to get a chance to get to know each other, do you notice that it immediately catches fire? That the facilitator is standing there with their hand in the air, that they're ringing a bell? Because I have heard in every single session when the facilitator says, okay, now let's get down to it, somebody says, wait, I'm not done. That energy is a result of when we ask more life-giving questions. It's all about the questions. We can change the energy in our organizations and our communities just by the questions that we ask. And again, like I mentioned in the final session today, we're going to have a really, I am so looking forward to it, because what we're talking about is how do you bring these new questions into your organizations and into your communities. We're going to be led by, is Ivy here? Ivy's in the back there. Ivy Schneider she carries so many roles in her life, and is going to be helping to lead us in questions. What's next? What will that take? And how will we know if we're getting there? How will we know if we're getting there? One of the interesting things talking about collective enoughness, and I'm going to talk about this again in the session that I do, Sam Coyle. Is Sam here? Sam outside? Where's Sam? NetTrepid has been, you know, we talked a little bit yesterday about the fact that when we see a list of sponsors, we just assume that it's somebody who gave money. Sam has given his heart and his soul, and has said, as PANO has said, as Anne has said, one of the huge questions she wants to start asking in that final session is, what's next for you, and how can PANO support you in that? What will it take, and how can we help? Well, NetTrepid is going to be standing side by side with PANO, because we know that some of what it's going to take is technology. And so you're going to be watching, again, an effort that is a true partnership. It's not a transactional relationship. It's a real partnership of NetTrepid standing side by side with PANO, saying, okay, what is it going to take to accomplish what's next, and what part can we collectively play in that? We know that things can't help but change if we change the way that we be in our day-to-day just by the questions that we ask. And those questions, like I said, if you take a look in your little swag bag there, you'll find questions. You'll recognize yourself in many of those questions on both sides of the ledger. But the reality is that if we change the questions, the simple answer to how we get beyond the frustration and we actually achieve our potential is that if we can just change the questions that we ask in our day-to-day, that will absolutely change our world just by being it. So I want to just encourage you guys to go out. First of all, Anne talked about what you love about your community. Is that a great question? It's out on the wall out there. You'll see a big butcher paper. Go out there, grab a marker, and answer it. What do you love about your community? Scribble all up there. What do you love about your community? We will see you guys in here definitely for lunchtime, definitely for the Standards for Excellence stuff that's going on at lunchtime. We will see you back here and evaluations. What we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to take a moment. I wasn't done. But they're so cute. I love that. I love that. What we're going to ask you to do right now at your table there is to take a moment and scribble down anything that stood out for you in the session that we just did this morning, both Ann's talk and my talk. Scribble down anything that stood out for you, anything that aha'd, anything that surprised you. Is there anybody that has one that you'd like to share? What stood out for you in this hour that we've spent together? Moving from what do we need to what will it take? Yeah. What else? Yes. Making sure we ask the right questions. You know, we have in our immersion class, we put a big poster up, and it says we learn to ask the right questions by just asking a lot of questions and seeing what works. So the fun part is that, as I said yesterday, when we're learning, we can't fail. So the quote, right question is the one that makes people feel great, and you just keep asking until you find it. Yeah. What else is standing out for you guys this morning? Yes? We keep reaching for ending what's wrong, what we don't like, rather than reaching for what's possible. Yeah. Anybody else? What's jumping for you? Yeah. Taking a learning stance rather than feeling like you have to. Anybody here have all the answers? Yeah, I didn't think so. And yet, don't we feel like we're supposed to? It's so ridiculous. We go out there assuming that we have to be seen as the expert, and we have to be seen as knowing all the answers when we know we don't know all the answers. So why do we expect that of each other? Great, I love that. Anybody else? Anything popping for you guys? Yes. The concept of opening the doors and working with the community rather than doing it for them. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about that a whole lot because I keep wanting to respond to you with stuff that I know I'm going to say in there. So, yeah. No, it's and again, if you just take the time during your own work sessions to just take a minute to reflect at the end, to ask at the beginning of your meetings what's going on in your life, and to get to know each other. How many of you know people that you have met, total strangers, through the questions that we've been asking at the beginning? What is the path of your life? How many of you know people that you just met here better than you know board members you've been sitting with for 2-3 years? Right. You know, when things fall apart in real life, when collaborations fall apart, when work problems fall apart, it is almost always not the thing. It's almost always the people. And yet we never take time. We always think if it's a business meeting, we have to get down to business. We think it's a waste of time for that, quote, touchy-feely stuff. And the reality is that the thing that's going to fall apart is the people. So let's make the people the greatest thing. Let's get to know that, no, it's not Susie being grumpy. It's that we're touching a chord in her life that we didn't even know. And that when we touch that chord and we know that chord is there, we can go, oh, wow, this must be specifically poignant for you, Susie. And we can reach out to Susie with compassion rather than going, oh, God, she's so grumpy. So again, modeling what we hope you guys will bring back to your organizations. And thank you guys so much for being part of this amazing experiment. We're just having a really good time and can't wait to see what happens today. So thank you guys.